Pandas are unique animals because of how seemingly simple their aesthetic qualities are, giving them almost a cartoon-like appearance. However simple this quirky, cute animal seems to appear, pandas do come with very nuanced details that can be quite tricky to achieve within a drawing. With that being said, hey guys, my name is Matt. Welcome to another video by Art in Context, where we explore various art-related topics, and in today's video we will be learning how to draw a panda in a realistic fashion. Now with that being said, we will be using very minimal materials. Luckily pandas are quite monochromatic in coloration, but they do have subtle hues of color that kind of vary between different features, mostly within the mouth area, and kind of these brown qualities that could be defined as more of a dirtiness within the fur coat. So with that being said, we do want to just make sure we have the appropriate materials before we get started, and the way in which we're going to start this step-by-step process is by first shaping the panda. Now we can start by forming the panda in its basic features, and the way in which we do this is we start by basically shaping the panda in very fundamental shapes. So a good suggestion is to start with the head, this way we can scale the rest of the body accordingly. So we want to start by placing distinct shapes from the eye patterns and ears to the shape of the body, and a good suggestion thereafter is to work with a reference image to also assist you in the drawing process. It's nice to just have an image of a panda to assist us as we draw a panda, and this way we can kind of capture the correct scale and the correct proportions as we kind of place these different features. Now basically we can utilize the lines and the different shapes of these patterns as they kind of are a way of defining the different structures or features and how they're assembled together in almost a Lego-like fashion. So we can almost use the outlining of these different patterns to help us or assist us in shaping the different features of the panda. The panda also has these bones that protrude from the shoulder blades as it walks, and this is something to note in terms of just shaping the more nuanced qualities in terms of how the bone structure moves as a panda is in motion. The panda is also quite rounded in the body, that gives their stomach a very hanging-like quality, and this is very unique to the panda, so they are quite rounded in their body structure. The hind legs are also very similar to the front legs, being very rectangular and very homogeneous in a sense, where there's not a lot of like bone structure to be defined because it's covered with such dense fur. So we can kind of work with this very simplistic shape with the legs because they are so densely covered in fur, both for the front and the hind legs. Now as we continue into refining the shape, we can now lightly erase our panda drawing, and in doing so we now want to start working quite slowly with some line work to bring a little bit more of a realistic shape to the various features of the panda. So we can follow the same process of starting with the head and going through the rest of the body, and this is where we can start to just kind of refine the actual details and features in the face. Because pandas are also quite fluffy in their fur coats, we can keep our lines fairly jagged and loose, kind of having these small strokes that define the actual shape of the panda, but not necessarily connecting to represent this disheveled quality within the fur. We do want to take our time working through the entire panda drawing, going through all the features of the body, and the aim here is to define the disheveled fur quality in the outline of the animal. As we work through the entire panda drawing, we can also see how these little strokes of lines can effectively achieve a disheveled effect within the fur of the panda. So take your time going through the entire outline as you kind of create these more scattered little strokes of lines to emphasize the fur-like quality in the outline of your panda drawing. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to move on into adding some light shading. So we can now proceed by building up our layers of shading with the panda drawing. We want to work in some light shading where the dark fur would be positioned in the fur coat, and we also want to slowly build up these shading layers within their correct areas in the fur coat. We can also take our time to add shading to the patterns around the eyes. That being said, we can also take a moment to draw in the small circular eyes of the panda. The intention is to start working on shading into all the darker features of the panda, including the snout and the ears. Again, take your time with keeping the shading within the right areas and utilizing the pattern to assist you as you kind of try to decide where exactly the right colorations or how dark your shading should be in certain areas. Again, utilize a reference image to assist you in your drawing process, and this will just make it a little bit easier for you. Again, you can see a sense of scale, you can see proportions, and you can also understand which areas are lighter and darker in the fur coat. The panda also has these black furry areas in the hind legs, which merge into the white fur areas along the backside of the panda. Now this feature is a little bit more seamless, so the idea is to kind of dissipate our shading into a way that kind of fades into that white fur to represent a more realistic transition as it is seen in an actual panda's fur coat. Now as we continue, we can move on into refining the features further, so we can now start to emphasize the textural qualities and shape of various features. Again, a good suggestion is to start with the face because it has more unique features such as the eyes within the patterns of the face. Remember, the eyes are smaller, not the actual large pattern, so we really want to make sure we are really emphasizing the structure of the eyes, the glassy quality within the eye, and how it differs from the dark pattern that surrounds it. Now as we continue, we can also apply a little more of a scribble motion and drawing technique to the darker fur areas within the legs, as this is a great way to emphasize the disheveled fur qualities in the panda and really emphasize the textural quality of the fur. Within the white areas, we can use moments of gray coloration and shading to suggest a slight shadowing and textural quality and difference within the white fur. Remember, when we are shading in white areas and black areas within our panda, they will differ in terms of the spectrum of highlight to shadow ratio. So if you are trying to represent shadows in white areas, you want to kind of work with grays, and if you are trying to represent highlights in shadowed areas, you kind of want to work with grays as well, as this kind of maintains a more realistic representation of shadow and highlights in these two different colors. Now as we continue, we can also add some highlights to the eyes as a way of shaping them, and we want to be quite careful to not overpower the eyes with highlights. A good suggestion is to also use hints of brown to emphasize the form of the eye. Now adding details to the panda is the next thing we're going to do, and we're going to start by adding in more unique detailing such as the red tongue of the panda. Now take your time with this feature, as it is one of the very few colored features in the animal. You can spend time creating kind of a gradient within the tongue, just to emphasize a more shadowed area as the tongue goes deeper into the mouth. We can also use line work with some brown and black colors to create a sense of merging between the dark and the light parts of the fur. Now this is really important to kind of capture this as best you can, because what you want to do is you want to make those seamless transitions, specifically in the hind legs, as seamless as possible. So the idea is to really have this smooth shading quality or stippling, or more of a cross-hatching method to represent not only the fur and maintain a textural quality, but to create that transition as smooth as possible. So take a moment and spend time on that feature, but as you do so, you also want to make sure you spend time on all the features one by one, slowly kind of pulling this drawing together. So take a moment and also spend time on the head, adding in some light shading and line work to bring more shape and dimension to the different features, and applying that concept of kind of using line work to create these seamless gradients whilst maintaining a textural quality within the fur. We can also use line work to establish some highlights within the dark fur, and this way we bring more shape and movement to the panda drawing. Now line work is a great way to achieve both highlights and texture within a drawing. This is also helpful to distinguish features from one another, such as the face from the legs, and this will also emphasize the depth of field within various features. So naturally we can have these little silver linings around the face to kind of bring a distinction between how the head sits in front of the legs. So we can also use some brown hues to create a more seamless integration between darker and lighter moments in the fur. Again, thinking about that transition, such as areas in the hind legs, and this is really good for those areas in the panda, also within the ears as well. As you slowly work through the panda drawing, building up these layers of detail with line work and shading, we can start to see how the panda becomes more realistic. Simply, it's a matter of taking your time with these areas where dark and light fur intersect with one another or start to merge into one another, and this is where line work and shading are really essential. So the idea is to really take your time with these different features and not to rush them for creating that seamless integration of highlights and shadow formations. And again, it's really important in those areas where we see how the dark fur intersects with the lighter fur moments, so having this concept of line work as a means of not only maintaining textural representation but defining the transitions of actual shading or fur integration between darker and lighter fur is really important. So working with lines is kind of the main drawing technique that you really want to get comfortable with and utilize for representing fur, and it is a great kind of technique you can apply to other furry animals. But otherwise guys, that is how to draw a panda through a few simple steps. Some key things to take away: make sure you shape the panda, make sure you refine the shape, make sure you kind of work with these loose little scattered lines to represent fur, slowly build up your tonal variation definitions of shading, and then finally refine your Panda drawing with the final details, going through each feature one at a time and making sure you take your time and be patient. But otherwise guys, make sure to enjoy the process and have fun with it. If you did like this video, please let us know in the comment section below if you'd like us to make videos on similar or related topics, and you can show your support by liking and subscribing. This helps us to grow the channel, which enables us to make more art related content for you guys, which we love to do. But thanks again for tuning in. That is it from me today. Until next time, cheers.